physical space. And the reason I know that is because as humans, we react differently to things that are in our physical space. Our body reacts to what we see physically and what we interact with physically. So really quickly, I'm just going to go through, what I'm going to talk about. As I mentioned earlier on, please feel free to interrupt me. I would love to have a discussion more so than just me spewing at you guys a lot of information. But there are a few things that I want to get to. Because again, I don't know everybody's familiarity, but I also don't want to tell you a lot of information that you already know. So I'm going to very briefly talk about what is augmented reality, why it's important, and particularly why it's important right now. And then before I start talking about BUNDLAR and going into our platform and what it does, I want to explain why. And let me introduce my birds that are screaming right now. That was probably Royce, and Hadrian's the one. Royce is the one that screamed, and Hadrian's the one that chirps. So if you hear them on the microphone, I apologize. They do like to talk a lot whenever they hear me talking. But the opportunity for why we have an opportunity right now, why augmented reality is a huge opportunity now, much like I would equate it to web development back in the early to mid 90s. And then I'm going to just show our platform off, what we do at BUNDLAR, explain what our tool is, how it works, why it's important. And I'm not really just going to talk about it, I'm going to show you, because I want to show people exactly what you can do with augmented reality today. And the one thing I just realized, I don't have actually a bio. I know a bio was sent out about me earlier. My name is Matt Wren. I'm the co-founder, chief technology officer of BUNDLAR. I have been prototyping technology for a few decades now. I won't say how many. And ultimately, I've been working in the immersive technology space pretty exclusively now for, I would say, 7 years. And I've been on the prototype edge development, developing prototype technologies for a lot longer than that. But what really sort of struck me right around the time that Palmer Luckey launched the Kickstarter for Oculus Rift is where, I've always been a VR fan since the 90s, and it was in the 90s, like just recently in about 2012 when VR started, the hardware actually kind of caught up and was able to provide a good experience. But before we talk about immersive technology, let's just talk about augmented reality. And the reason I asked the question I did about placing information into your physical space is because that's what augmented reality is. At its very simplest sort of definition, augmented reality is placing data within your physical space, within the presence of the physical world, and knowing, having some context of what the physical world is. And so what that data is and what gets presented and how it gets presented, that gets a lot farther down the rabbit hole of what the definitions are. But if you think about it, there's really only two components that you need to create augmented reality. There is the physical world and something in the physical world to either trigger or anchor the data, or a combination. And then there's data. And the data can be anything that you would normally see on a computer screen. It can be audio. Any sort of data can be augmented reality. It can be audio, it can be video, it can be images, text, 3D models, you name it. Any type of data can become augmented reality. And it's the combining of those two things, the data with the physical world, and that's what makes it AR. So if you look at this example we have here, I have a printed brochure. That's the physical world that's going to anchor the data. And then we have these graphics or these buttons that get anchored based on how the camera recognizes where that document is. And that's what creates the augmented reality. So in that image on the right, you see that the buttons are anchored to the document. And what you're looking at there is those buttons, those are graphics, but they're interactive. Each one of them does something else. So if you press that one on the top right that looks like a page, that would load a web page. And if you push the one that looks like 3D glasses, that would load a 3D model. If you push the one that has a little play button on it, that would cause a video to appear. So the cool thing about augmented reality is that aside from putting data into your physical presence, you can make it interactive as well, just like you would on a computer screen or a computer program. And so the next question is, okay, well, that's neat. That's what augmented reality is. Why does that matter? And before I get into the why really augmented reality, I want to talk about why now. And why now is probably the bigger question to ask, because this speaks a lot to the opportunity that augmented reality presents today, which is the fact that back in 2017, Apple and Google made augmented reality part of the mobile operating system of nearly every mobile device on the planet. They made it directly part of the Android operating system and iOS as an operating system. And to backtrack as to why that's important, if you look at you know, the best sort of parallel that I can talk about to this is what caused the internet, the consumer internet, to really become a thing that affected all of us on our day-to-day lives. You know, if I had to drive it back to one real incident that caused it to blow up and explode and become really popular, it is when Microsoft bundled Internet Explorer onto the Windows operating system. And with the launch of Windows 95, people no longer had to go and like download extra software and get a service provider, you know, like AOL or something, and load programs onto their computer to use the internet. All of a sudden, it was just part of the operating system of the computer. So that happened with Windows 95 in 1995, and all of a sudden by 1999, if you were a company and you didn't have a website, you were behind the times. So that same sort of thing happened back in 2017 already. Augmented reality became part of the mobile operating system in 2017. And so, you know, we're almost getting to the point now where I can pretty safely say that within a year from now, if you're a business and you're not using augmented reality, you're behind the times. Because augmented reality is a communication channel. It's something that people are going to use to communicate going forward. It's the communication channel. And ultimately I know that because frankly, Apple and Google and Android and Microsoft and pretty much every major technology company has already come out and said this. So why is that important? It's great that now's the time, but what does that mean? Why is augmented reality going to be this really big future of communication? And it really comes down to exactly what Adam said in his answer, which is almost anything is going to be easier to do if it's in your physical presence. If you don't have to think about doing it on a computer screen or using a keyboard or a mouse, if stuff is just in front of you and it's in your presence and it knows what you're doing and it knows where you are, it makes it easier. And so with augmented reality, in addition to the fact that you're just dealing with data, you can make the data interactive, you can make it immersive, you can make it something that's part of where you are. And doing that, it tricks our brains a little bit. Your brain, as I've mentioned, I think I mentioned on this call, I'm not sure if I mentioned it yet or not, but I'll just say it. Our bodies as humans, as animals, we are wired to react to our physical presence. We are wired to be more aware of the things that are around us in our space. And so we interact with them differently. And what that means is it also means that you learn faster when you think something is in your physical presence. You understand it quicker. You remember it for longer. On top of the fact that right now augmented reality is relatively new and it's kind of engaging and people think it's cool, that makes it more entertaining, which also makes it easier to pick up on. It makes it more memorable. So just this new technology, it's more engaging and it engages us more. We learn it faster. It makes it easier to digest the information and then retain it longer. And we know that it works. We study this very particularly when it comes to training, when it comes to learning things. This is why I brought up, why is it easier to learn something? There's a lot of large companies like GE and Boeing and AGCO and the US military that have done studies and said, okay, we're going to do a side-by-side and we're going to look at, you're going to do this training via PowerPoint and then you're going to do the same training via augmented reality. And they're going to train two different groups of people and they're going to see who passes assessments faster, or who can pass a test faster, or who can learn how to complete a task faster. And across the board, augmented reality shows improvements. The studies that you're kind of seeing happen now, it's actually almost at the point now where people have stopped trying to measure, okay, does augmented reality provide an improvement over traditional training, and how much of an improvement? What you're really seeing a lot of the studies now is they're actually trying to figure out, okay, well, why? Like, is it the entertainment factor that causes the improvement, or is it just the physical presence? Is it, what is it? What aspect of the augmented reality really causes the improvements? Because they've already said the improvements happen. And so the next question is, what if you're not a billion-dollar company, but you want to use this stuff? GE, Boeing, these are huge, humongous companies. So they had the bandwidth and they had the money to be able to use augmented reality years ago and do these studies. What if you're not a giant billion-dollar company? Because augmented reality, frankly, is very hard. It's a really hard technology because it's actually a bunch of different technologies that all work together. You have to, a computer, if you think about it, it has to understand what the camera is seeing. It has to understand its three-dimensional position based on movement. It has to update regularly. It has to, potentially know its location. And then it has to be able to understand the data that it's presenting to you present it in the context of the space that it understands through all those sensors, and then also track your interactions with it. It's a very tricky technology to program, and so it's costly and it takes time. And what you're looking at here is this is the average AR app development cost in 2020. So if you were just looking to do a very simple prototype, it would cost $45,000. That's kind of out of the reach for a lot of small businesses. If you're Boeing, it's easy. If you're, a 100-person design shop that works out of Chicago, that's something that you're probably not going to have the capability to do. And so that creates a little bit of a market gap because AR is hard. We already know this is not something that's going away. This is, basically Apple, Google, Facebook, Amazon, Microsoft, Intel, HP, you name it. Every technology company in the world has already publicly declared this is the future. This is the future of communication. This is where communication is going. And so it's not going away. And there's a massive increase in demand right now, but there's still a little bit of a lack of direction in that people just don't know, okay, well, how do I use it? How do I even get started programming? Or how do I try to build something? And in addition to that, the people who do know how to build this stuff, we're in very, very, very high demand. It's really hard to find an out-of-work AR developer right now. And learning to code AR, the tricky thing is, I'm trying to remember who it was during the initial questions that was saying he was learning HTML, and then he was learning JavaScript, and he was learning C, and C was really hard, so we dropped that class, and now he's going back to another one. When you try to code augmented reality, you don't just need to know one discipline. You need to understand 3D modeling. You need to understand gaming engines. You need to understand C code. You need to understand the mobile application environment, so iOS and Xcode and Eclipse and Java for Android. There's a lot of different technologies you need to understand, and it can take a long time to learn how to build this stuff. So it's often several different developers working together or one very, very, very what's called full stack developer. And on top of that, there's content that needs to be created. So people just need to take the content that you want to use to create augmented reality experiences, and someone has to create that too. It's creating a huge opportunity, much like the need for web developers back in the 90s. As the consumer internet took off, every company started to realize they need a web developer to develop a website. It's a new technology. People didn't understand how they were going to use it. And honestly, another parallel with augmented reality is a lot of people, when they were building their first website back in 1995 or 6, is they're like, oh, this is just something that I'm going to build once and then it's done. They didn't realize this web is a communication channel that you are going to be updating constantly for the entire life of your business. Augmented reality is a communication channel. It is not something that people are going to build once and be done. Again, why is this important to some people? And how do you the next question is, how do you actually capitalize on this opportunity? This is where I'm going to talk about our platform a little bit. So it's a little bit self-serving. I apologize. I'm trying not to make this a sales pitch in any way, shape, or form, but I want to talk about our platform. And I would encourage you to please look at other platforms that are out there and understand the opportunity that augmented reality is going to create over what I would probably say is the next decade. At BUNDLAR, the biggest thing that we looked at is the fact that creating augmented reality is really, really hard. It takes a lot of knowledge of a lot of different technology stacks. And so if you want to make it useful, we need to take the hard part away and let people who have skills like creating a PowerPoint or working with Photoshop or working with any other graphics program, if people have those types of skills, they should also be able to just create augmented reality. And that was our goal, was to create a platform that makes it so that people who have basic graphics skills can also start to create augmented reality. And that's what we did. BUNDLAR is a platform. It's a web-based platform that gives you a drag and drop web interface so that you don't need to know how to code. You don't need to know the mobile operating systems. You don't need to know any of the really heavy technology that a developer like myself would need to know a year ago to create augmented reality. You just get a drag and drop web interface and you press a button and you can publish AR. And the reason this creates an opportunity is because once again, there's still a lot of companies out there that need people to create the content because there's tons of content to create. Almost everything you see now on the web, information like that's going to have to be translated into AR. So here's how the BUNDLAR platform works really quickly, and I'm going to show you. First, there's the content. We don't create content. We're not a content studio. Most of the people that we work with, they already have their content. So anyone who's got training on how to, again, assemble a couch from IKEA or fix a dryer, or a manufacturer who's got a part that they sell. They already have a lot of the training material that they would produce. They've already written manuals and potentially produced videos on how to maintain or build or use whatever they're going to train people to use. They already have that content. And so we've given them a drag and drop web interface where they can take the information they already have available, drag and drop it in on a web interface, and then press a button to publish it to augmented reality. And in the web interface, it's going to show them how to place things in the context of 3 dimensions. Our system does the publishing and distribution, and then it becomes made available to a mobile application. Once it's out on the mobile application, though, we track how people use it. And the other thing that allows is it lets you measure how people interact with the physical world in a way that there's no other real way to measure. The example I like to give about this is a university that we work with called St. Louis University Madrid. They publish a book that they send to students who've been admitted to the school but haven't, made their deposit and said they're going to go there. Most of the students at St. Louis University Madrid don't get a chance to visit the campus before they go to school there because it's an international school. So St. Louis University Madrid, they came to us and they said, we want to augment the book that we send out to students who've been admitted and play some videos on the pages and show them a little bit more of what it's like to live on campus and make it more engaging. Most of the students that they're sending this to are 18 to 20 years old. They interact with their mobile devices all the time, and they figured augmented reality was going to be a really cool way to engage with them. And so they were hoping to see a little bit of a bump in their admissions, which they did see. And if you think about how much college costs today, even getting one additional student is a pretty significant financial response. But the other thing that they weren't, that I like to speak to that they didn't really expect, even though they only send 200 of these books out, we were able to measure that they had over 3,000 interactions with that book. And there's no real way to measure on a printed book that's been sent around the world how many people looked at it. We were also able to tell them that the page about student life, student activities around campus, that got 6 times as much interaction as everything else in the book combined. So the next time they're looking to update this book, they might want to make that section a little bit bigger. Again, these are things that there's no other real way to measure. And here's why the BUNDLAR platform works. And again, this is what is presenting a little bit of an opportunity for people now, which is, an augmented reality. There was a couple companies that did a study for how long it actually takes for someone to create an augmented reality application. There's a couple different aspects of it: designing and wireframing, programming, the final publishing to the device, and the difference between whether you're using marker-based AR or markerless AR and actually building those algorithms too. And if you look at it, there's 15 hours, 40 hours. There's a lot of time that it takes to build this stuff. But if we can take and create a tool that makes it easy to not do all of those things, and again, just give people a drag and drop web interface and they press a button to publish, all of a sudden, there's a lot more companies that have the capability to benefit from AR. And all of those companies are now going to need people to help them create those experiences. These are some of the features. I think I talked to Brian, and this presentation will be made available via PDF after. So if you want to look through the features, you can go through here. But we work with image marker triggers or planar triggers, which is basically just understanding the world that I'm looking at, my floor or my wall. We have different components that are built in that, again, just make it very easy to reuse information that most companies already have: video and audio, media players, 3D models, labels, buttons. And ultimately, we also make it very easy to get into using our system for the users, which is that we generate a QR code every time we build an augmented reality bundle. And doing that means that anybody with a mobile device can just point their device's normal camera right at the QR code, and that'll take them directly into the experiences. So now I'm going to actually show you, because it's much more fun to see this stuff. Give me a second. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing on this screen. If I can find the button to stop sharing on that screen. There we go. And I'm going to start sharing from a different computer right now, which is actually linked to my mobile device. Give me a few moments. All right, and so what you're looking at is this iPhone that I have right here, and I have the screen projected, and it's tracking. And so what I'm going to do first is I'm going to point to a QR code just using my device's camera. So I've opened the iPhone camera, and I'm pointing at this QR code. And you can see that it gave me that Safari link up top. And I just click on that, it takes me right to a web page. The one thing I like to point out, and this is one of the iOS, Android, Apple, who likes Android, who likes Apple devices. I'm an Android fan myself. On iOS is the only time you ever see this web page. If you're on an Android device, or even if you're on an iOS device, but your browser is anything other than Safari, this stuff just automatically happens. But in this case, if you don't have the app, you can click the button to go get the app. But if you do have the app, you can just press that orange button, and it'll open it in BUNDLAR. Again, you only ever need to do this on iOS. On Android or on iOS, on any other browser, it just automatically happens. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to press the button to download this bundle. And what it just did there is it downloaded that augmented reality bundle to this device, which means it'll always run on this device now, whether or not I have an internet connection. And you saw that it downloaded the entire augmented reality bundle pretty quickly. So now if I point at this image marker, it's going to show you this video that's playing on top of my business card. Now that's normally my business card, although it's projected pretty big on the computer screen right now. And there is audio that goes with it, but I have the iPhone muted so that I can keep talking. Now what I'm going to do is, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to double tap that video, because I can make it play full screen on the device too. And you'll notice now, I don't even have to point it at the business card anymore. It's still playing on my device. It was triggered by augmented reality, but now it's just playing on the device. But if I exit the full screen, which I did there, it'll reappear. And you see those other orange buttons around the video that's playing? I can tap any of them. And that first one there will show me instructions on what this experience does. It tells me I can double tap the video to make it full screen. On this one here, it tells me I can tap that button to see a full screen media experience. And I can tap this other button over here to the right, and it's going to take me to a contact form. So if I tap that one, it's going to open a web browser and take me to the BUNDLAR contact form. If I go back to the experience and I tap this other one, it's actually going to load a completely different full screen augmented reality experience that plays a video and gives me some text and has another link button at the bottom of it. So that's one augmented reality experience. That's just a demonstration. Let's talk about a practical use for learning how to do something, as we were explaining at first, using augmented reality. So I've got a different QR code that I just went to, and this one's related to Microsoft, actually. Thank you, Adam, by the way. Although actually Adam didn't have anything to do with this project. He's just, I know he's from Microsoft. So this one's related to Xbox. And what you're going to see in a moment is I'm actually going to point at the cover of the packaging for an Xbox. And this is an image of it. It actually works better if you have the actual box versus an image on my computer screen. But you can see what appears there when I'm pointing the phone at it is I've got a 3D model of an actual Xbox. And then there's also that little video that plays. And you can see those little green buttons, those little labels is what they are. I'm labeling three-dimensional space. In one case, the top of the Xbox. In the other case, the actual cardboard box that the Xbox would have shipped in. And if I press the one on the Xbox, give me a moment here, you'll see that it tells me a little bit more about the design, and it gives me a button that will take me to another web page if I pressed it for the technical specs. Or if I press the one on the bottom, it's going to tell me a little bit more about what's inside the box and why Xbox is cool, so that people could actually see this part of the experience without ever even opening the box if they were, say, in the store. That other thing that's over there in the video is a product explosion. So you'll see it's just a video of kind of what's inside the Xbox. And that's nice. That's a little bit of a marketing use case. But what I really want to show you is what happens if you point this at the back of the actual Xbox. Now you'll notice I didn't go to a different code. There's two different augmented reality experiences here, and I have two different markers without having to change anything. And in this one, you'll see that little button that says Start Tour. So I'm going to press Start Tour. And the first thing it tells me is that if you're going to be using the Xbox, you have to plug in the power cord. The next step is you might want to use these USB-A connectors to connect your controllers. After that, there's a storage expansion, which you're going to probably want to use before you turn it on. And this shows you what the storage expansion does. I can press the button in that one and play the video. Beyond that, I can go to the next one, which is you want to plug in your HDMI cable. Finally, you want to add your Ethernet connection, so you've got internet, and that's the end of the tour. So what that just did there is that shows you a product demonstration for how to plug in and set up your Xbox once you've got it. And let's say you've been using your Xbox for a good year or two now, but you got a support problem. Okay. And the thing I want to show, which is really hard because the augmented reality trigger is very quick, is you'll notice that what I'm going to point at is I'm going to point at an image of an Xbox controller. And you can see that it's got that subscription question button up above it. And I can click that, and if I was logged into the my Xbox account on this device, it would just take me right into the support page where I can then ask about my account. Unfortunately, I'm not logged into Xbox on this device. My actual Xbox account is on my personal phone, which is this one's a testing phone. But what I was trying to show there was, okay, well, there's a couple of use cases for augmented reality. Simple support and field-based training, and we can get, it can get much more complicated than that, but those are a couple of simple ones. And so let me stop sharing on this screen and start sharing on another one. And on this screen here, where you're going to see in just a moment that Xbox controller again. There we go. Are you able to see? Yep. Okay. So that's, again, I was just looking at different slides on my computer from the same presentation. But what I'm going to go to now is I'm going to actually go into the creation interface. So this is the BUNDLAR web system, what we're looking at here. I'm going to do a real quick product tour of it. This is our demo account. So there's a lot of different augmented reality bundles in here. And these are the analytics. These are how many people have viewed different experiences that take place from this account. We've had 93 different devices view things. They've viewed them nearly 3,000 times over the last 90 days, and they've interacted with the things that show up on the screen about 4,100 times. We can get a little bit more detailed in the analytics if I want to go and look at a very specific bundle, like, say, our COVID medical demonstration. And that's this is actually similar to that one that you showed. When I first had that slide that had the product brochure and the images that were appearing on it, that's this augmented reality experience. So over the last 90 days, there have been 15 people who viewed it. They've rendered augmented reality things to show up on the screen about 200 times. There's been 320 things that showed up. About 10 of those devices were iOS, 4 of them were Android, and that product insert, that long, tall piece of paper, that's one's gotten the vast majority of the traffic at 164 times. If I want to change the date ranges, I can. If I want to select a very specific date, I could do that. And again, I can check the different bundles. Like any web-based content management system, we have a library of all the media that's ever been uploaded so that people don't have to upload the same thing multiple times. They can just select it from our libraries. And we have lots of different videos here. We have lots of different 3D models up here. We have lots of different images that have been used. And then I have audio files as well. But what I want to show you, which is the really cool part, is how do you actually create augmented reality? So I'm just going to create a new bundle right now. And we're going to call this one ITKAN demo. So when we first go into an augmented reality bundle, it's empty. You can see I have the name up here. I can add a description if I want to. I can add a little preview image if I'd like to do that. I'd rather just get directly into the creating of the augmented reality experience. So the first one I'm going to create, we're going to use an image marker. This is something that you'll see whenever the camera recognizes an image that it knows. And what I'm going to launch here is I'm going to launch a video and a button. And now it's asking me to upload the image that I want it to recognize. So I'm going to go to my computer and upload an image from BUNDLAR's website. And once it comes in here, so that's the image that I uploaded, and you'll notice that it's in this sort of web-based I'm only on a web browser here is all I'm running. There's no special programming. And you can see that there's this 3D space, which what I'm doing now to move this around like this is I've got my left mouse button held down, and it's allowing me to kind of rotate my view. And I can go under the image marker, or I can go above it, because this is a representation of 3D space around here. I can zoom in using the mouse wheel. I can zoom back out, or I can use the right mouse button to move it left or right and actually move the world around where I'm at versus rotating. And I want to edit this experience. I want to add things to it. So when we first enter the editor and I press that edit button, I can see the trigger. And again, the trigger is that image. So when the camera recognizes this image, that's when it's going to cause the data to appear. I have layers. Layers are a way to do a little bit of advanced usage, but think of them like if you've ever worked with a graphics program, like a Photoshop layer or some sort of graphics layer. It's just a layer of visibility. And then finally, we have the assets, and you can see that I have nothing in there now. There's no 3D assets in there. But these are the different types of things that we can make appear when you're using augmented reality. The media player, that's kind of like a full screen takeover, like that web page that you saw when I did the business card. There's a label, which is just a way of labeling three-dimensional space. I want to take something in 3D space and add more information to it. A video is just what it sounds like. It's a video. An image is an image. A button. Buttons are cool. I'll show you those in detail in a little bit, in a moment, but a button is basically anything that's going to be very interactive. Audio, again, is just, like an MP3 file. It's just a sound or a song or a speech or any sort of audio file. And a 3D model is a 3D model, and I'll go over those in just a moment. But what I want to do here is I want to load a video, and I'm going to load the video that's already in my library, which is the BUNDLAR video that you saw earlier playing on my business card. And so what we're looking at here is this is a 3D video. It's playing on that image, and I want to lay it flat. So I'm going to click on it, and that brings up the editor, and you can see that I have these arrows that if I grab and drag, it's going to move it. And I can switch what mode it's in over here by clicking these little icons, or I can do it over here in the menu. In this case, I'm going to use the icons, and what I want to do with this one is I want to rotate it back so that it lays flat. And I want it to be a perfect flat, so I know a perfect flat is -90. So I'm going to go -90 there. I'm going to move my view a little bit, and I'm going to touch it again, and this time I want to center it on the card, and I want it to play pretty much right flat on it, because you can see that there's now a little space between the video and the image, and I want it to lay right there. And it looks like it's a little bit small, so I want to make it just ever so slightly bigger. So I'm going to hit this scale button over here, and I'm going to make it bigger. And that's pretty good. And we can see this is a video. I can play a preview of it. I don't know if you guys are getting the audio share that I'm hearing, but I'm going to stop because it's very loud in my ear. And that's it, though. I've just added a video to an image. I've just made a video play on top of a static image. But now I want to add a button to that because I want to make it a little bit more interactive. So with the button, there's 3 things I can do with a button. The first one is view experience. And this is really neat. What this allows me to do is this allows me to take everything that I've put in this experience and just wipe it away and load a different one, which is very useful for a lot of advanced use cases that I can talk about in a moment. The other one is toggling layers. So this is toggle that visibility layer, which I mentioned earlier. We can have different pieces of data appear on different visibility layers. It's, again, just another way to become very, very interactive with the augmented reality. When I did the tour of the back of the Xbox, that was a single experience, and there were all the different steps of the tour were each a different visibility layer. So when I press the button, it would unload the current one you're looking at and load the next one. And the final one, which is the one I'm going to do, is I can just load a website. And I'm going to load the bundlar.com website. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to browse my computer for the button, and I'm going to import it. And what's a little bit interesting here is you don't see, it says that it's here, but I can't see it. And the reason I can't see it is because it loaded it perfectly centered on that image marker right behind that video. So I'm going to move it out from behind the video right there. Pretty easy to tell where it is, because if I can't find it, I can just click on it and it's going to show that little indicator around it that helps me find things if you start doing a lot of stacking and a lot of things in the same space. Because again, this is a 3-dimensional space. So when I look at this in the actual experience, the video is going to play on top of the image and the button is going to appear actually below it. But that's just it. I just created an augmented reality experience, and that's one. Now I'm going to do 2 more. This next one I'm going to do is going to be image marker based also. And this is going to show you a 3D model and the label. So I'm going to browse my computer for another image marker. There it is. It's going to upload into that 3D space again. And this time, without going into too much detail about the things I've already showed you, I'm going to go in and I'm going to add this time a 3D model. I'm going to browse my computer for it, and what I'm going to upload this time is an animated engine. It's going to come in just a second here, and it's going to be huge. As you can see, compared to that image marker, that 3D engine is pretty big. So I want to grab it and scale it down. And now it's an appropriate size for that marker. Actually, a little bit smaller would be good. And I also want to rotate it, because it's not really, the image has it sort of sitting on its side, and then they came in, rotated up top. So I want to rotate it down a little bit more like that. That's pretty good there. I also want to now position it so that it's sitting right on top of the marker. and sitting pretty much right on where the image of the engine actually appears on the image marker. So that looks pretty good. This one's also animated, so I can play the animation and make sure that it works. And we can see that that pneumatic engine there blows out into all the different parts. Okay, that worked pretty nicely. The last thing I want to do here is I want to add a label. Because once again, just the capability of labeling 3D space, labeling something that you see in your environment is very, very powerful. And so what I'll show you in this case is as I select that I want to add a label over there, you can see that as I move my cursor around the 3D environment, there's that little green dot that just kind of tracks where I'm at, even if I go up on the 3D model. And in this case, I just want to label the corner of the marker. And I want to tell people, okay, well, this is going to launch a pneumatic engine. What that's a 3D model of. And a pneumatic engine run on air power. Now I'm going to change the colors a little bit. I'm going to make the background a nice blue. And I'm going to make the text white so it shows up. And you can see that it's also changing down here as I change it. And I can then move this label around too. So even though I started by putting it there, if I want to move it somewhere else, I could. And I can move it in all 3 dimensions. I can, the nice thing about these arrows is if I want to move it only in 1 dimension at a time, I can just grab the arrow versus grabbing the whole thing and kind of dragging it all over. And in this case, what I want to do is I want to drag it over there, and I want to drag it right here, and I want to make sure that it's sitting right on top of the image. So right about there. And I'll show you a really neat example of what you can do with labels in just a moment. But I want to save this experience. And now you can see that this augmented reality bundle has 2 experiences in it. Again, this is kind of like the Microsoft bundle where there were 2 different things that I could point at and they would show 2 different things. But what if I want to make something appear in my room and not have a marker? I just want to make it appear in my room. Well, that's creating what's called a planar trigger or a markerless experience. And in this one, I'm going to use a little bit more realistic of something that I actually built for a client. And we're going to load a gas meter. And it's a scaled gas meter like you would have on your house. So you can see now I've just got that little kind of reticle that shows up. And I'm going to edit this experience, and I'm going to add an asset to it, and I'm going to add another 3D model this time. Only this 3D model is going to be a gas meter. It's going to take a second to come in because it's actually a pretty big, pretty high definition model. So once it's in there, we see it. And this gas meter is actually scaled to life size. That's how big it's going to be. So when I look, when I look down at this reticle, I know that each, one of these sort of big squares is approximately the size of the meter. So this is about the size of a real gas meter. What I want to do, if I was training somebody, which is what we did with this, what this gas meter is and what the different pieces of it are, I'm going to add some labels to this gas meter because I want to label 3D space. So I want to label right up there. Oops, I think I put it inside. And I want to say that that label is that's the inflow. And this is how gas gets into. Here. Give me a moment and pop out and pop back into it. I'm going to add another label. And this one, oops, I put it in the wrong spot. That is the outflow. Gas comes out of the meter. I'm going to change this one's color to red, and I'm going to change the background. Oops, I want to change the background to red, actually, and I want to change the text color to black or white. There we go. And I want to move that one in 3D space so it shows right up on that outflow valve. Right about there. And we'll save that. And that way I'm able to label something in 3D space. I'm able to label this meter. I'm going to save that really quickly. And now I just want to show you the hard part, because as I mentioned before, the augmented reality, there's the content, and this is the content that I've been kind of playing with here using a drag and drop web interface. But I want to show you how to publish. I'll do all that hard stuff, get it from here to an actual augmented reality experience on a mobile device. So I'm going to do demo ITKAN 0408, and I'm going to save it. And then I'm going to press this button here. And what happens when I press that button is that's where a lot of the magic kind of happens. I'm going to reload the page, and it's going to show me now that this one's building. That's what that little orange dot tells me. And it's going up to our servers right now, and it's actually building. So while it's doing that, I'm going to jump out of this experience pretty quickly, and I'm going to show you some other cool ones. I'm going to give it about 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes to build, but I'll show you some of how this stuff gets used. So with that gas meter that I showed you, this is the actual augmented reality experience, and I'll show you what it looks like in just a moment. I'll switch back over to the other screen. But this is that gas meter, and it was used for a training course, and it sits about its own height above the ground, and it's got a couple of labels around it, one for the inflow, one for the outflow. Oops, I hit the wrong button up there. One for the inflow, one for the outflow, and one for the information about the meter. And here's one of those things that just sort of shows you what you can do with labels. And I'll show you a preview of something that we are currently building. This has not been released yet, and it's not really publicly accessible yet. But what you're looking at there is that is a space capsule. That's actually what's called a Dragon capsule. It's created by SpaceX. And we're creating an augmented reality experience right now for the Space Force, which is going to teach them some of the information about what are the dangerous areas that somebody who's recovering astronauts from the space capsule have to deal with when they approach the capsule. So these are the engines. So there's the Super Draco engines, which are the really big thrusters. Then there's the Draco engines, which are the little ones. And then there's the drogue parachute, which is a different label. It's going to be, this one's in progress. But this is, again, just using a 3D model that appears in space in your, in your room. And we're able to use this to train the people who are going to go essentially recover astronauts when this thing lands in the ocean, and the people who are in the boats that have to go get the astronauts out of the space capsule. Before they can do that, what happens is they actually have to test all these little areas around the space capsule, because these contain dangerous, hazardous materials. And so we're teaching them, like, here's all the areas you have to test, and here's what you have to look for. Can a user import their models directly from Creo or SolidWorks? Good question. You can import any three-dimensional model that is either an FB. Right now, it's either FBX, GLB, or GLTF. So that's the different. There's a lot of different formats of 3D models. This one here is a GLB. The ones that I showed you before, the gas meter is an FBX, and that engine is actually an animated FBX. But let's go back really quickly to my bundle there, because it's probably. And I can publish it. And what I want to show you is, you noticed before how I was using QR codes to access these augmented reality bundles. That just gets generated automatically. When we build a bundle, it gets automatically generated, so nobody has to worry about doing it, and I can just download the image right here. But in this case, you also notice that when I built it, I pressed preview. Preview is like quality checking, because I can have things that are published and available out to the world, but I don't necessarily want, if I'm making changes to it, I want to be able to see those changes on my device, but not be affecting what everybody else out in the world is already seeing. That's what the difference between preview and publish is. In this case, I'm just okay to publish it. And now it's available to the world. And that's how we created, in the matter of a few minutes, 3 or 4 different augmented reality devices. I know there's about 20 minutes left, so before I go into a Q&A, open Q&A, and just answering any questions you have about this, I'm going to switch back over to sharing my mobile device, and I'm going to show you what that gas meter looks like, because that's actually a pretty cool experience. So let me go back over here and share this device again. And there we go. The other thing I like about, again, the augmented reality bundles is whenever I've downloaded it to the device, from that point forward, it's stored on the device. So I don't have to go download it again if I don't have good internet. And I can just load this GTI demo right now. And what I'm going to show you this time, because when I showed the initial demonstrations, I showed them to you without, when I was looking at a marker. And in this case, you can see that it's kind of putting those dots on the floor in my room, which means that it's recognizing the floor. And what I want to do right now is I want to paste I want to place that gas meter in my room, and it's here, and I can move around it. I'm unlimited because I'm actually plugged into my computer, so you can see this right now, but I can move all over it. And it's there in 3 dimensions. It's life size, you know, if I reach my hand out. And I can press any one of those labels, and it gives me more information about that particular part. So in this case, the green one is the inflow, which is how gas gets into the meter. The red one is the outflow. That's how gas comes out of the meter. And this is where a technician is going to look for the important information, like when was this installed, who's the manufacturer, what lot number, in case there's any sort of recalls or things like that. This is actually, this is an actual training material that was done for a corporation that supports the natural gas industry. So it's an actual use case for how people are using augmented reality today, right now. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing screens and answer any questions you have. I just threw a lot of information out very quickly. I don't know if you want to do raising hands to ask questions, or Brian, however you want to do that. The one thing I'll say that I do want to say, though, again, is like, okay, so, you know, this is all about what opportunity is this presenting? Like how, okay, this is nice that we have this cool tool and augmented reality is neat, but how is this presenting an opportunity right now? As I mentioned earlier in the talk, there's a lot of companies that are trying to understand right now, what can they do with augmented reality? In just this demonstration, I've shown you 4 or 5 different actual use cases that people are using right now, today. We have we have people teaching, you know, we're creating industry knowledge for gas technicians who are going to be on site actually looking at gas meters and doing services on them. We have the actual Space Force and the people who are going to rescue astronauts who are going to be trained on the hazards of the space capsule. The whole thing is, there's a lot of people that need to create this content. There's a lot of content that needs to be created, and there's a lot of other companies out there that need to learn, how can we use this? And if you have the capability, even of just using a tool to create augmented reality, then you can be the people that are teaching these companies what they can do with it. Much like the people who were creating websites back in the mid-90s were teaching companies what you're going to do with a website. Because a lot of people just thought a website is, oh, it's just this, it's an advertisement that I put on the, that I code this advertisement, I put an address to it, and that's what people need to learn. Okay, so the question, what essential skills do developers need to utilize BUNDLAR? Basic understanding of graphics and graphics manipulation, so just knowing, you know, how to position things, which I showed you, and ultimately like understanding the basics of how to like use imagery and lay it out, lay out some basic design skills. That's pretty much it. You really don't need to know much more. I saw Bill unmuted himself. Do you have a question, Bill?
Yeah, something like it would be interesting. I have a friend of mine who works for AMF. AMF is a company that builds bowling pin setters.
Yep.
And those machines are extremely complex. People don't realize how complex they are. But what's even more difficult is finding people to fix them. And you know, proprietors right now in 2020, 2021, they've made all these investments in machines and everything, and trying to keep down costs to hire and train mechanics. So they're trying to teach themselves. Mm-hmm. And I think this would be, BUNDLAR would be fantastic. It's a low-cost product that would allow you to see incredibly complex machines and help learn how to do that. So I'll give you a referral.
Well, let me toss that right back at you. I'm not the one who's going to create the content for how to do that. If you want to bring that to AMF and tell them, hey, I'd like to create this content for you that you can then sell as a service package, that's just creating a business opportunity. Because my team, what we do, what my team does, we create this tool and we manufacture this tool and we manage this tool and we make it work. And we have a lot of other things that, like what you're seeing right now, I showed you in a few minutes, I showed you just the really basics of what it can do. It can do a lot more, but ultimately, this is some of the areas where there's content to be created for literally every industry in the world right now. That's why I'm saying there's a ton of opportunity. Most companies in the world have not really, it's very early in this technology. I saw Nisar unmuted. I don't know, did you have a question?
Yes, I was just wondering what do the images work with your augmented reality?
You wanted to see what it looks like to just put an image in space? I can show
Yeah,
you. Well, let me show you. It's easier to answer that one just by doing it. So I'm going to go back into this experience that had the video, and I'm going to say, okay, well, I'd like to put, let me put an image in here. I'm going to add an asset. I'm going to go over here. I'm going to select an image from my hard drive. Let me browse and find one that's appropriate.
Matt, if you're trying to share, it doesn't look like you're.
Oh, I'm not sharing. I forgot. Sorry. I forgot I wasn't sharing anymore. Give me just a moment and I'll show you.
thank you.
So we'll do that. And so I'm back in. What I'm going to do here is I'm just going to click that video experience again. It's going to load in here. I'm going to edit the experience. Thank you, by the way, for telling me that I wasn't sharing. I'm going to go and add an image. I'm going to browse my computer for one, and I'll add this image of a gas meter that was used for that same training. And it's going to show up in there, and there it's just added the image. And so what I can do now is I can position it, because images are 2 dimensions, so I can lay it flat and I can scale it down and I can move it up into the corner. And that's what it takes to load an image in. Probably want to make it a little bit closer to the image marker too, so it's not sitting 3 feet above it. But that's what it takes to load an image in.
Thank you.
I could add all sorts of images too. The one thing I'll say about buttons too, because buttons are really neat, is that anything can be a button. So I could make this entire gas meter a button, and I could make this gas meter kind of unload itself and load a different visualization of it. So it's really neat what any image or any 3D model can be a button. I saw another question. There we go. What are the verticals that are low-hanging fruit right now? The one thing I'll say is definitely low-hanging fruit, or what we consider to be low-hanging fruit, is training. Training seems to be one of the quickest adopters of augmented reality technology. That's more of a horizontal because it exists across all industries. In terms of the industries that are very rapidly adopting augmented reality right now, they're verticals. Real estate is one. Manufacturing is definitely another. The military is probably one of the biggest adopters of this technology right now because they've really realized what the value is. What did I say? So military, healthcare is another huge one. Healthcare, it's amazing, actually, augmented reality technology for healthcare, for being able to visualize things that are very hard to visualize, like, you know, explaining to somebody what happens inside their body in terms of a disease state or a treatment. That's a huge use for augmented reality, because those of us who don't have medical training, sometimes it's very hard for us to understand what a medical condition is. But if you can actually visualize that for somebody and place it right in front of them as you're explaining it, it's a really great way to explain medical conditions or medical procedures. Other question, is the grid layout a common feature of the app to develop experiences? The grid layer, so when you see that grid visualization, what the grid does is it just sort of helps you understand, like, this is the ground plane, or this is sort of like the 0 mark. So it makes it easier to visualize the 3 dimensions so that you understand that, you know, this is the flat surface. I can make it go away just by clicking that. So you don't actually have to have it there. And then you're just sort of looking at that horizon line. But the grid does tend to help myself in particular to visualize how things are going to be positioned related to each other. I just realized I'm not sharing my screen again. So I'll just keep sharing from this point forward. So anyway, what I was just doing here is, you know, as I went in there, I saw the grid, and that grid just sort of helps me understand where's 0, where's ground, because I can just make it go away. And if it goes away, I can sort of still see that horizon off in space, but it's really a little bit harder for me to recognize how things are positioned, where the grid just makes it easier. Another thing that actually I want to bring up, I meant to bring this up when I was talking about opportunities, but here's one that actually speaks very directly to this group. with the web, there's already some published accessibility standards. Like those, you know, we have the 508 rules. There's some standards. Augmented reality and virtual reality as a developing technology, there's not a lot of standards yet. It's still a little bit of the wild, wild west. And those of us who are doing development in this space, this is something that is at the forefront. We are trying to, you know, we know, as an example of virtual reality has allowed people who have, you know, like limited mobility experience at least some level of what it's like to be on a mountaintop, you know, to see what it's, you know, what it's like to climb Mount Everest, because there's a virtual reality experience of climbing Mount Everest that you can do. And so, you know, there's some really great uses that virtual reality and augmented reality can help for serving, you know, people with accessibility needs. But ultimately, for those of us who are creating augmented reality, we're also trying to make sure that we understand how to keep this accessible. So there's things that you can do with augmented reality, like I can create an augmented reality application that uses my phone to scan text and make it bigger, or to, you know, play audio when it reads something. There's all sorts of ways that you can do this. And ultimately, we're at the forefront of understanding what some of those capabilities are, and there's a huge need. There's a question there. Is it possible to use audio or near field communication as a trigger? I'll answer that question by saying yes. It is possible to use anything that the device can recognize as a trigger. Why you don't see audio so much as a trigger is because the people are still trying to figure out how to use that. But yes, we've worked with people before who wanted to use things like beacons, Bluetooth beacons as triggers, or near field NFC radio signals as triggers. You'll see that more for things like navigation, if you're just placing how to, you know, directions or navigation in front of somebody on their device. So if you've ever used the augmented reality features that are built into Google Maps, that's one way of using near field communications as a trigger. I've experimented, or I know people who've experimented with using audio as a trigger. I'm going to stop sharing my screen again, because ultimately I can't see you guys if you're asking questions or not if I have my screen shared. So I'm going to go back to non-screen sharing. But yeah, you can essentially anything that can be detected in physical space can be a trigger. And ultimately, there's things that are even not in physical space that can be detected as a trigger. There's companies right now that are working on behavior patterns. So if your phone recognizes your behavior, it'll place things into your visual cues because it recognizes things that you've done. Great point. It would be intriguing for people with vision loss or blindness to at least have some background cueing to what other normal vision people are experiencing. Yes. There's, you know, in the one thing I like to talk about too with the pandemic and how that has affected things is if you're thinking like, if you think about the training that people do around like how to service a gas meter, normally that's training that would take place, you know, in a physical space with a number of students and an instructor, and they actually have physical access to a gas meter. You know, gas meter is not something that's easy or cheap to go ship around the country for people to do the same kind of training via like a Zoom call. And you don't really have that physical understanding of it if it's not actually in your presence. But you can use 3D imagery and planar-based augmented reality experiences to teach people how to, say, service a gas meter as if they were actually in the presence of the physical device, but without having to necessarily shift the physical device around, you know, to people who couldn't gather together in a training classroom. So, you know, if you start to think about how the technology can be used in a sense like that, you also start to realize ways that, you know, people who have maybe mobility issues and can't get to a training class or can't necessarily get to like a shop that would have heavy equipment. That's another great use for augmented reality, is training people on things that are just really, really big. I know I used to remember I worked at a machine tool show at McCormick Place several years ago, and these companies would spend millions of, like literally millions of dollars to ship in an example of a giant like CNC machine. And it's like, okay, if you think about how much it costs just to ship that machine into a single trade show, how much would it cost to ship that to a place for people to train on it or even to do installation on it? What if people want to learn all that stuff without actually having to either go travel somewhere to learn it or to have the physical presence of it? These are all things that you can use AR for. Other questions? I know we're running close to time here. I'm happy to go a little bit longer if I need to, but I don't know what the limits are, so I'll let Brian say that one.
We'll just announce when we're at time, and then if people need to go, they'll go. And if anybody's still around and wants to ask questions, then it can be up to you how long you want to stick around.
So, Matt, this is Pat. Rather than type in the chat, I'm going to just ask. So, you make a great point about standards being developed for AR associated with disability, similar to WCAG or 508 nationally. For digital content. I would analogize this to seeing a film when you have low vision or blindness, and certain theaters offer an enhanced audio experience, audio tracking, or there's a term that's applied to it, and others on the call may know that term. Victory Gardens, for example, they have a big accessibility effort for years, and they offer people with vision loss to have that audio experience, which provides not just the conversation, of course, or the background audio, but it provides a sense of tone and, for example, physical stature and, nonverbal cueing that the director wants to get across. So I would think, guys, that as AR develops and Matt and other companies develop these great tools that can be utilized by non-developers, basically, that it would be ripe for an analogous kind of application to film enhancement for vision loss and other challenging disabilities. So, but you make a great point, Matt, in terms of mobility challenges and logistical challenges to travel, that this type of AR provides great opportunity.
Yeah, so as with any emerging technology, it's going to take some time. Honestly, just for, in some cases, for people to understand what needs to be done. So, YouTube, I don't know how long YouTube's been around. It's been at least a good 10 years. But it's only recently that they've been able to automatically close caption videos like that. That technology didn't exist up until just last year or so. And now if I'm live streaming to Facebook, I can click a little tab that says automatically caption my video, and that's great that I can do that now. But that's that was a technology that came about 10 years after that platform launched.
And in fact, Matt, the deaf culture and community often refers to craptioning versus captioning, because captioning so often loses and makes mistakes. YouTube is improving dramatically as the speech engines improve, and but fair point. It took a decade to even get here.
Well, and I don't know if you've noticed this. There's one thing I've noticed is that closed captioning, like automatic captioning, like the videos are doing now. A year or two ago, when that became relatively common technology, it was terrible. But the nice thing about YouTube having, whatever, 5 million videos a day uploaded to it, is it can run every single one of those through artificial intelligence. And as it runs more and more videos, it gets better and it gets smarter. And so it's just going to keep getting better from here, which is kind of nice. Luckily nowadays we have the technology that it will continuously improve, and it will do it at a much faster rate than it used to. But what I was saying, like with augmented reality, if I'm doing a visual experience in augmented reality, we do think about this, like how can I make this something that's useful for somebody who has a limited vision? Is it like, could we add audio cues to it? Can we add haptic feedback to it? Tactile things. One of the things that we've done with these augmented reality experiences here is we have a tool, and I'm not sharing my screen again, so let me share. But we have this tool built into the system already where if I'm looking at something, I can go into these advanced settings here and I can say, okay, well, for somebody who has limited visibility, if they're seeing this, they might not be able to see it, but if I can zoom it in like that, maybe they can. So I can just go in here and I have a little toggle, and if I flip that toggle, that's the same thing as allowing like pinch to zoom on your mobile device. So now you can magnify it. So we're thinking about this stuff, but again, it's very early and we're still trying to learn all of the different things that we have to do. And so that, that, like I said, that right there, just the fact that there's developers such as myself and hundreds of other developers who are trying to learn this stuff, that creates a whole other series of opportunities. But I would say, honestly, the biggest opportunity right now is just understanding that if you know how to create augmented reality content, you are so far ahead of everybody else right now. And there's so many companies that are going to need this. The analogy I'll draw is you are like a web developer in 1995. Those guys are web developers. I was one. We were getting paid ridiculous amounts of money to code in HTML back in 1996 and 1997 because people didn't understand it. They didn't understand what the web was. They didn't understand how it worked. And so if you learned this basic skill of coding HTML, you were massively in demand. That's where augmented reality is right now. If you know how to do it, if you learn even the basic skill of using an interface like Bundle AR, you know so much more than all these other companies that are trying to figure out what is this AR stuff. And it just becomes a marketable skill that you can then go sell.
Yeah, that's great, Matt. And I don't mean to dominate this, guys. So I know, as Brian mentioned, we're 3 minutes after 7. So I know you can't take too long, Matt, but can you tell me, do you need a license for Bundle AR? Or is it purely a mobile app subscription or one-time cost? What is the cost?
Our mobile applications are free and they're up in the app stores. You can just go download them. And if you're building using the Bundle AR platform, it's a SaaS, so software as a service based subscription. So we do have a free trial. So anyone can just go up and sign up for a free trial and they can publish one bundle with 2 augmented reality experiences. But then beyond the free trial, it's a month-to-month subscription service. We do focus, I'll be honest, we focus primarily business to business. We don't really do a lot today. We don't do a lot that is directly consumer facing. So the pricing is a little bit high for someone who's going to be, just trying to do consumer stuff on their own. But I would say that if you have a business customer, it's even a small business. What we wanted to do is we wanted to make this approachable for small businesses. So for a small business to build to have a 1-year subscription and have a single augmented reality, two augmented reality bundles that teach a few things, it's about, $3,000 or $4,000 a year. I think let's see, a starter plan. Lauren, you might know this better than I do if you're listening. I think it's $3,200 a year for a starter plan. And with that, they can have 2 augmented reality bundles a year. And then as people start to use it more, they can go up the levels of subscriptions. Now, again, we're early in this area, so we're going to be announcing new plans and we're going to have other pricing and we're going to have things like that. But we're generally focused very B2B. And, if I go back to that presentation that I was sharing early on, the cost of prototyping, the cost of doing a simple prototype yourself as a developer in augmented reality costs about $40,000. So if you compare being able to publish something in a matter of a day or 2 days without having all these technology skills, and you're spending $4,000 or $5,000 for that, versus spending $45,000 to develop a simple prototype, the difference is you know,
Right,
the
10x,
it's very, very cost effective to use a
yeah.
platform like this.
Well, great, Matt, thanks. This was outstanding. I know I speak for everyone who attended. Brian, maybe you can take us home?
Yes, very good. Thanks a lot, Matt. I've recorded this, so I can wrap that up and send off the slides and links to recordings later on. So thanks again, everybody, for joining, and we will see you in 2 months.
Thank you, everybody.
And thank you, Lauren, for being our go-between.
Thank you. It was
Thanks, guys.
great.
Thank
pleasure.
All right.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
Matt. Thanks.